Okay. One Piece chapter 1129. At first, I'm not gonna lie to you, right? When I was first reading this chapter, I was like, man, this one's getting a little long in the tooth. Like it's roughly the same amount of pages that you're kind of used to, and there's a lot of action that took place in this, but there was a lot to digest. And I don't mind it. Like I do appreciate what Oda does, because again, he just throws you directly into the island and you just get a crash course on the world building. So it's like very important to go through and absorb what he's doing. But this concept of the live dolls and then how it transitions over and you find out who this sun god truly is, and that basically they're in a Lego land, like I was joking. Oda actually did it. But to see how all of that was just built up towards that ending, I like it. Like I like the way that Oda progressed through this chapter. So let's back up a little bit, right? So we open up and we see the sun god. He's super pissed off and he uses the term live dolls. And that like immediately made me go, wait a second, that's the name of the chapter. So this is definitely important. I know some of you guys like, no shit, Sherlock, you're a great prognosticator here, but just stick with me for a second. So the words live doll and temple were bolded. And that's where I started looking and going, okay, live dolls, temple, servant, all on the same page. I was just drawing extra attention to this. And it kind of made me start looking at it when I was getting further into the chapter going, okay, so he basically set this whole thing up because he's got a god complex. Because live dolls, that's because it's toys and etc. As far as like the Legoland stuff, and he's got real people and objects there. But then temple, the god complex, and that makes me go back to Skypiea, because what you have with Anel slash Enryu, and then servants, the exact same thing. And that's where we shift over and we have the Straw Hats. And I like, again, that they're all together for this. And so Nami makes the assumption like, hey, why is this guy so freaky? Chopper's like, why does he look like a demon? Usopp is still looking ahead. Luffy's in full adventure mode. They're jumping all over the place. Luffy's like, yeah, you know, he took all this time to go through and build up this amazing city. Maybe we should be a little bit more careful. The cat that they're riding on just smashes through the different buildings. And then you have the moment where people are watching and they're like, why is Ish Cat actually helping them? What's going on here? The sun god's getting pissed off. He's giving chase to them. And then that's where we get a very impressive moment here. So Nami just immediately looks through and it's like, hey, I've already memorized the map and I know what direction we need to go to. She starts moving towards the front of the line. That way she can start directing Luffy. And this is important to me because this chapter showcases how each of the Straw Hats, you just see that collective synergy where they all know in crucial times when they have to step up and serve their individual roles. It's just second nature to them now. And they just kind of default to Luffy. They know that it's their job to serve as pillars for him. So Nami is the first one to step up and she's like, yeah, we gotta go this direction. I memorized the map. It's super simple. And she breaks down everything in an easy to understand fashion, saying that to us, this looks like a giant room, or rather Zoro says it, but to everyone else like that are giants, etc., they look at it and this is just a regular room to them. And what we end up seeing is how basically what looks like a cabin or an apartment, however you want to phrase it, you have the one room where that belongs to the quote sun god, who's just a really big giant, and then you have this big Lego room on the other one. And when I looked at it, it kind of reminded me of the layout that, I'm not going to say the mangaka's name, but it reminds me of a layout of a mangaka that has been very, very favorable in terms of some of the praise he had for Oda. And I'm just going to say that this person has a very messy studio. If you know who that is, say the name down in the comment section. I'm going to read the comments for this one just to see if anybody catches it. So the next thing we get here is that the sun god takes out his net and he's like, you know, hey, like this was originally a holding cell for giants. I'm not really worried about you guys. And Sanji, as he's paying attention, he's like, this guy's talking a bit like a samurai. And that made me stop for a second and go, were there giants in Wano? Because I don't remember that. And that's where as soon as he gets the net on them, we see Zoro and Sanji. They're like, hey, just keep going, cat. Don't worry about it. We'll get you out of here. And Zoro and Sanji, they follow Nami's lead. Nami is giving the instructions on how to navigate. Now you have Zoro and Sanji serving as the firepower for Luffy, because Zoro's cutting through, Sanji is doing his attack patterns with his feet and etc. And the guy's getting very like, oh my god, they broke through the metal wire. What happened here? And as he starts getting updates about the various creatures that he had that have been eaten in one case and destroyed in another, he's like, that makes no sense because this is a carnivorous rabbit. And it's like, yeah, but it never ran into somebody like the Straw Hats. And like the Straw Hats with Luffy while he's hungry, bad combination. And so this dude's getting very worked up, and he talks about, and this is the God complex stuff here, he talks about how a story without a script is unfolding in his garden. So now we have a character with a God complex that is starting to lose control. But what's interesting is the fact that he knows who the Straw Hats are. And what's also interesting about that is that just before we get that reveal, he says that he created a world that has its own evils and its own heroes. And yet that was everything that he carefully constructed. Now the Straw Hats have basically flipped all that on its head. So that God complex is being challenged. And so that's where we go through, and he starts watching as Usopp, he now takes the time to step up to the plate. He shoots out the star. I guess you could say that Chopper was the first one to step up and serve his role for Luffy, because he's the one who was communicating with the cat. But basically, as the Straw Hats are moving forward and you see some of his captives where the Sun God knows that they are basically going like, hey, you know, we got to get out of here. This is a chance to escape. He reminds them like, yes, this is a good time. You helpless dolls. You're fighting it back against fate, but this is not going to work. This is a part of despair and hopelessness. And again, the God complex, because he thinks he's in control. He thinks this is a game. And so as the Straw Hats are moving, that's where he's like, I'm glad to have you in my collection. And by him saying that and then saying the names of all of the Straw Hats and saying like ultra rare Luffy, ultra rare Nami, ultra rare Zoro, ultra rare Sanji, ultra rare Chopper, etc., 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 ultra rare Usopp. That's him reestablishing control. You're now part of my collection. And I might be reading too much into this because, again, I'm obviously behind. So I might have misread the whole possibility of a God complex, but that's how I'm reading it. And the language is just very interesting to me. And so what we end up seeing is that Luffy goes into Gear 4. He shoots out a punch. He ends up cracking some of the damage here. And as Luffy is preparing for what he's doing, Nami, you get this funny exchange between Nami and Sanji, whereas Nami is asking Usopp, like, hey, you know, are natural disasters anyone's fault? And I like how, like, again, this is like Nami. She's got the heart in there, and it's like, oh, this bitch is about to do something crazy. Like, it's one of those things, like, you know how sometimes when you get in an argument with your girlfriend or your significant other, and they ask you a question, and you get the feeling they already know the answer. They're just looking for permission to get mad. That's the vibe I got from Nami right there. And sure enough, in the next panel, she's like, I've been through plenty enough in this. I am sick of this guy. And I'm like, oh shit, she's going to use Zeus. And before we can get to that, what ends up happening is Sanji steps in. He's got the ugly crying face and he's like, yeah, you know what, man? You know, I feel you too, Nami. I can't stand this guy. The thought of this dude out here and he is taking your clothes off and changing you, it really pisses me off. It's like, dude, Sanji, get your head out the gutter. Because it's like, I'm just going to stop. There's a dirty joke there I'm not going to tell. But it's like, Sanji, get your head out the gutter. And so that's where we get like the flashback and we learn about how there's this bird that brought the Straw Hats over towards Mujin. If I said the name wrong, obviously I've not seen the anime version of this. So I'm obviously going to get that wrong. But he says that the giant pirates, they were sailing out to escort the Straw Hats. And so he's got this sleeping gas when he sees Nami and Luffy looking like they're beginning to stir. He sprays it on them. And then we get back into the current timeline. We get out the flashback and he's looking up. And he's like, these clouds in the sky are not clouds that I created. What in the world's going on here? And it's because Nami has already gotten Zeus ready. And Zeus just hits this dude with a lightning bolt. And everybody's looking. They're like, oh my God, sun god. But what I like about it is that, is Nami the strongest person on the crew? No. But she stepped up and she provided enough of a distraction that Luffy, finally, that gum attack that he's got, is able to stretch across and they bust a hole onto the wall. And it looks like they got to wait to get outside now. And that's where the chapter ends off. So it looks like we're about to go for some exploration. I mean, I'm all for it. I like this. I like this a lot. I like the direction that Oda took this in. Again, there was a lot in this chapter. This chapter took a little bit longer to get through just reading. And that's never a bad thing in my opinion, because usually with a lot of battles shonen and adventure shonen, things flow through very quickly. And there was nothing wrong with the paneling in this chapter, but there was just so much that you could go through and unpack where you knew, like, okay, this shit's important. Let me slow down. Let me read everything very carefully. And when you do that, at least for me, you see how each of the Straw Hats, they each serve their own individual role and how they did it so effortlessly. This was a good chapter. If this was a chapter that people in the fandom did not like when it came out, I have a feeling when I get caught up for One Piece, and I won't necessarily be doing blind reactions because I'll be actually sitting down to script the reviews, but I'll keep it in podcast setting for how you have it now, only because I'm still waiting to get some more consistency to where I can afford to have an editor on this channel. That way I can edit the reviews like how you see on that Naruto Explained channel. But I have a feeling I'm going to have some hot takes. If the fandom did not like this chapter, they thought that this arc was starting off slow, I am not going to make a lot of people happy in my opinion, because I think this is a good start to an arc. I really like the way that this arc is starting. I really like it a lot. Like, I have to pause right now because I'm waiting for more thumbnails. Like, as of this recording, let me see where I'm at. So this says October 13th, 2024. I'm using the Shonen Jump app. As of this recording, the most recent chapter is 1,163. So I'm going to try and get more thumbnails done. I'm waiting for another set of 4. I'm going to try and get more. That way we can kind of blitz through. It's kind of my goal to be caught up by the new year. So my chapter question to you guys is, where does this rank for you guys when it comes to the start of a new arc? How does this weigh for you guys? But as always, guys, if you like anything I had to say, don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, and share. Thank you so much for watching until then. Have an awesome day, guys.